What if I told you the CIA once ran a secret global program, not to fight wars, but to collect drugs? Not for healing, not for recreation, but for control. Hidden behind redacted memos, buried in Senate hearings, and veiled in silence was a project so strange, so experimental, that even seasoned intelligence insiders tried to bury it. It was called Project CHICKWIT, the CIA's international drug hunting operation designed to find foreign chemicals that could be weaponized to control human behavior. Think MKULTRA. But this time, it was global. And the goal? Predictable, reliable, mind manipulation, on demand. This is the real story behind Project CHICKWIT. Project CHICKWIT, sometimes labeled MKCHICKWIT, was launched in 1967, operating under the CIA's MK search umbrella, the post-MKULTRA continuation of behavioral control experiments. Its mission? Simple in theory and diabolical in practice. It was to identify new drug developments in Europe and Asia and obtain information and samples to develop a predictable way to manipulate human behavior. Wow! The CIA began to literally create their own sanctioned pharmacy. But CHICKWIT wasn't a standalone operation. It had a partner. It was one half of a dual program called MKOFTEN. Oh yes, the infamous mind control program that was testing hallucinogenic drugs, and then went even darker by trying to weaponize the supernatural. According to declassified documents, the CIA wanted to develop a predictable capability to manipulate human behavior, not just for defense, but for covert operations such as interrogations, sabotage, and infiltration. So the program emphasized this with certain goals from MKOFTEN's program reach. Together, they were engineered by the CIA's Office of Research and Development and Technical Services Division. The same minds behind MKULTRA. Overseeing it all? Sidney Gottlieb, the CIA's chemical control mastermind. Sidney Gottlieb was the long-time chemical behavior head for MKULTRA era work, and the 1977 hearings cite his role broadly, though CHICKWIT documents often redact specific names of those involved. Of course it was. How convenient. Although the CHICKWIT program was no rogue experiment, it went to the top. It was authorized at the highest levels, with updates going directly to the Director of Central Intelligence, who at the time was Richard Helms. CHICKWIT operated like a covert chemical pipeline. It had a respectable support structure and support streams. Their mission was to scour global pharmaceutical catalogs, international medical journals, and classified drug trials for anything new and potentially useful. Working alongside this program, or shall we say the other half of this operation, was the US Army's Edgewood Arsenal facility. Yes, the infamous Edgewood facility that conducted many experiments for projects under the MKULTRA umbrella. It served as a clinical testing unit on military volunteers. Also, civilian prisoners from Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia supplied prisoner volunteers in at least one documented human trial, with was compound reference EA number 3167, 3-quinaclidinyl benzylate. That's not all. The program also involved academic institutions and contractors. Simultaneously, some university consultants like George Washington University were hired to perform literature sweeps, identify new psychoactive drugs, and flag anything that altered mood, cognition, or behavior, without the administration's knowledge. With this support structure, let's now look into how the process worked. First, the CIA and Army jointly funded a contractor in California, name still redacted, tasked with monitoring pharmaceutical catalogs, conference reports, and clinical studies from across the globe. Then these discoveries were compiled into a computer-controlled database. Yes, a computer database which was evaluated by the CIA's Office of Research and Development. Now this was the 1960s, and they were already digitally tracking chemical profiles. For me, this was ahead of its time. Now, if a compound showed promise, it was flagged by CIA's Office of Research and Development and sent to Edgewood Arsenal, where military scientists ran tests on animals, and if the results were promising, then human volunteers. Often soldiers or prisoners were brought in for live trials and studied. The process was methodical. Can it be delivered orally, inhaled, or through the skin? How long does it last? Does it disable, confuse, or make someone more suggestible? We knew this was going on because the Senate's MKULTRA and MK search record summarizes this phased program explicitly. Therefore, MK CHICKWIT found the drugs. MKOFTEN and Edgewood figured out how to use them. These weren't recreational drugs. These were lab-forged weapons for the human psyche. So what were these compounds? Let's start with BZ compound reference number EA-2277, which is 3-quinaclidinyl benzylate, QNB. This was a powerful anticholinergic incapacitant. In simple terms, it made you hallucinate, forget where you were, and lose touch with reality, in some cases for days. The army called it a non-lethal weapon. Volunteers at Edgewood Arsenal called it hell. Then came EA-3167, which was a modified version of BZ or QNB, but with even greater potency and duration. The CIA considered this compound a high-value operational tool. Why? Because it could be absorbed through the skin and its effects. It blocks the action of acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter, leading to various physiological effects. Delirium, memory loss, and cognitive impairment that lasted up to 6 weeks. It was tested on 5 Holmesburg prisoners and 15 soldiers at Edgewood. The CIA flagged it as a potential VIP threat because it could be effective orally or via the skin. In 1971, CIA records show a $37,000 transfer from Office of Research and Development to fund advanced testing on this compound. Also, the use of LSD variants, such as EA-1729 freebase or EA-3528 malate, referenced as D-lysergic acid diethylamide, and its malate salt, were used in inhalation and aerosol trials. These trials measured performance under impairment, and primary Edgewood reports include clinical investigations on these compounds, to which they were aerosolized for covert dispersion and sprayed into rooms or onto surfaces. Additional incapacitants referenced in Army and Department of Defense digests were dimethylheptylpyrin, DMHP, or EA-2233, which is a synthetic cannabinoid and an analog of THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, that is found in cannabis. Benactazine, ditran, scopolamine was also used to test confusion and compliance windows. Think of it as a truth serum meets amnesia drug. From these Edgewood trials, it monitored reaction times, judgment, and motor control under the chemical fog some of these compounds produced. Soldiers dosed mid-task showed severe judgment breakdown, loss of motor skills, and verbal confusion. Entire units became disoriented within hours. These experiments weren't just chemical, they were tactical simulations. The question wasn't, does it work? The question was, can it be controlled? Can an enemy unit be chemically disabled? Could a diplomat be covertly dosed into confusion? Could compliance be engineered chemically? Well, according to post-trial reports, yes. Just imagine James Bond slipping this into a handshake or onto a doorknob, just like the movies, but in a real-life scenario. So, one question that comes to mind is, did any of these substances get used in the field? Officially, no. But documents reveal that CIA and Army scientists actively discussed delivery mechanisms such as cigarettes, drinks, skin contact, even aerosol release into hotel rooms. Some researchers believed they were developing tools for use in Vietnam. Others hinted at clandestine field testing. No one knows for sure. But research and activities into these programs leaked. A few names broke silence. Dr. James Ketchum from Edgewood Arsenal facility described that the tests and scenarios performed on soldiers caused them to not remember their own names after BZ exposure. Dr. Albert Kligman, the dermatologist at Holmesburg Prison, later faced scrutiny for testing on uninformed inmates. Test subjects have since reported lifelong cognitive issues, dissociation, and paranoia. The 1977 Senate MKULTRA hearings confirmed CIA funding, methods, and intent, even if much remains redacted. The Pentagon's 1977 memo to Congress places the start in 1967 and termination in 1973. The CIA's own research and development paper notes agency support for CHICKWIT and MKOFTEN's activities were terminated by a Director of Central Intelligence Order in January 1973. The CIA director ordered CHICKWIT and its sister projects to be shut down. No charges were filed, no names released. And the database? Gone. And so, the question remains. If this was shut down in 1973, who picked up where they left off? Should we dive deeper into Edgewood Arsenal facility, or trace the foreign suppliers behind CHICKWIT's hidden pharmacy? While there's no confirmed record of these drugs being used in field operations, the delivery systems were real, the human effects were documented, and the intent was unmistakable. CHICKWIT wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was a coldly calculated intelligence program to weaponize chemistry and find foreign tools of mind control. Many believe its science lives on. Maybe it does. The drugs are gone, the files are buried, but the goal, control, remains eternal. Thanks for watching. Support the channel by hitting the like and subscribe button so I can continue providing your mind with curiosity. Until the next one, remember, stay curious.